Hello there, my name's Joe and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to look at how we can make these 4 coasters from one piece of wood using VCarve Pro. So I'll start by closing this down and opening up a fresh screen. Now, assuming you've opened up your VCarve Pro and you're logged into your Vectric account, we're going to start off by creating a new file. In the panel that we can see here now, I'll just go through the measurements that we're going to be using, and I'll just run down these options that we got. So job type is going to be single-sided. Job size, we're going to use a length of wood which is 450 millimeters by 100 millimeters by 8 millimeters. The Z0 position is material surface. The XY datum is in bottom left. Modeling resolution is just standard. And I've chosen for the material, I've chosen pine. And if you want to look at what that will look like, that's what the pine color looks like. Okay, so back to the 2D view. We've now got our workpiece here on the screen. So we're ready to move on to the next part. So my next task now is to create a rectangle to represent my coaster, and I'm going to put a little border inside that. So we'll start off with, under create vectors, I'm going to select the draw rectangle icon, click on that, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create a rectangle of 100 millimeters by 100 millimeters. Which is the size of my coaster, and ensure that to begin with, I want a square corner type on this bit. So let's select create. There we go. So we can see that this rectangle, I'll close this. We can see this rectangle isn't to the end, and that's exactly really where I want it. I want a piece of wood left at either end. Okay. So we've got this rectangle. I'm just using this as my guide whilst I'm designing the coasters. I won't actually be cutting this. I won't be cutting using this particular rectangle, but we'll come to that in a moment. I am now going to add an inner outline to it. So what do I need to do? I need to deselect the rectangle. Otherwise, I will be resizing that. So I'm going to select the rectangle icon again, but this time I'm going to select 85 millimeters and 85 millimeters. But this time I'm going to use a radius internal, and let's click on create. So we've now got my inner border. I'm going to close that. Now obviously we can see that this is not in the center of this square, so to put that right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to select by left clicking this line first, and then I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to select my original box. So, and you need to do this in this order for this to work. I'm now going to come across to the transform objects align tool, click on that, and we're not working on the material, we're working on the selection. So I'm now going to center the selection by clicking on this icon here, and there we go. So we've now got my inner border in the center of my 100 millimeter square, and let's close that and then we'll move on. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a JPEG or PNG image to my coaster. But before I do that, I just wanted to have a quick look up here where we have our layers. We can select layers from here, or we can select it over here on the left-hand side. I just want to show that at the moment we have just one layer. I can toggle the view on or off. So if I toggle it off, you can see that the work that I've done thus far has now disappeared. Now it's back, but the initial work, so the 2 boxes that I put on are on the first layer. and that'll become, or may become, a bit more important a bit later on as we move on with this design. Okay, let's just get rid of that. So anyway, so back to this first coaster. As I said, we want to add an image to it. So I'm coming back up here to File Operation, and the third icon in, which is Import a Bitmap, I'm going to select that. Now that's opening up my images folder, which is just where I wanted it to be, so that's nice and handy. And I'm going to use this image here, the smiley face, and select Open. Here we go. Now, to move this icon, I can just, because this is selected, I can now just move this across by using my arrow keys, which I'm going to do. It is obviously a bit large, but we'll sort that out in just a second. Okay, so we've got the image in situ, but it is too large. So if I come up back up here to Transform Objects, and we select the Set Selected Object Size, click on there, and we come down to these boxes here. You'll see these boxes have got the XY link, so I only need to adjust the size on one axis, and it will automatically be adjusted on the second. So I'm going to change the x-axis to, let's try 65. And you'll see here that it's already been adjusted on the Y as well. Let's apply that and see what that looks like. That looks fine. I'm just going to close that and deselect, just so we can have a quick look at this image and see if this works for us. Yep, and that looks fine to me. So let's move on. So now our coaster looks like it's taking shape quite nicely, but the image that we can see is just our JPEG or PNG, and we need it to be a vector file. So to do that, we need to first of all highlight the image. I can find it, there you are. We see that that image is now highlighted. We come back across to Create Vectors, and the very last icon, which is this little icon of a birdie, which is the Trace Bitmap icon, we select that. That will open up a new panel on the left-hand side, and we're not working in colors, we're working with wood, so we want the black-white option, so we select that. Now, what I tend to do, because I'm a beginner myself, I'm not particularly skilled at using these slides, what I tend to do, I start off by just clicking on the preview and seeing what it might look like if I just leave these selections at default and see where that gets me. So let's just click on preview to begin with. And we can see that that image isn't bad, but the edges are a little bit rough, and we might be able to improve that a little bit. So what I'm going to do is up here on the colors threshold, I'm just going to bring that down to 15, which is my sort of start point I usually go with, and see how that looks to begin with. And if that doesn't work, then I may have to start playing with some of these other little tools here, but we'll see. So let's have a look at this preview, and that's improved enough, I think, to work. So I'm going to select Apply. And once we've done that, I'm going to select Close to close down the Trace Bitmap tool. There we go. So before we move on, let's go back up now and just have a look at what our layers are doing. And we see now that we've got an additional layer, which is the bitmap layer. Now, if I select it, you'll see it's now in bold, which means that is the focused layer. If I click on the radio button to hide it, you'll see here, this is the actual vector file that we will be working with. So what we are seeing, if I select that again, what we're seeing at the moment is we're still seeing the JPEG image, but that has no meaning to us, and we hopefully we can get rid of that. And if I double click, let's see, will this work for me? No, that didn't work. So let me try another way. So another way of getting rid of the file if you're a bit clumsy like me and not very good at this. So I've just selected, you can see the purple outlines. That is the vector that is selected at the moment. I'm just going to move that up by 5 clicks on my keyboard. And you can see there now that the vector file is there. I am going to select this bit and select delete. Now that is a very clumsy way of doing it, but it works for me until I've because I'm new to this. So until I can get better at it and doing it a better way. I do find on some images you can just delete the top image, the PNG image, and that works fine, but not always. So I'm just going to move this down the 5 clicks, and we should be back in the center. If you're not sure that it is center and it looks slightly off, what you can do is what we did before. We've highlighted the first object, which we want to center back into the second object. So I'm going to press, hold down the shift and press the borderline again. And I'm going to come back to our alignment tool here. And remember, we're in the selection, not in the material. So let's just click that. And you see that it moves slightly. So we're now back in center. Let's close that down. Let's just deselect it so we get a good look at it. And we're ready to move on. So now we pretty much have our first coaster, other than we've got to do the toolpaths a bit later on. But so I want to move on now to making my second coaster. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight everything in the first coaster. I'm going to do Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste. And then I'm just going to use my keyboard arrows again to move that across to the next position. And there we go. And I'm just going to now just deselect that. So I've now got my second coaster. Now to make it slightly different, I'm going to highlight the image, and I'm going to go to the mirror tool, which is under Transform Objects, fourth one in, select that, and I'm going to do a flip horizontal just to change the tongue, just to make it look a little bit different. So let's flip horizontal. There we go. And close that. So now if I come down and just click away just to close that. So we've now got 2 different looking coasters. And all I'm going to do now for the remaining 2 is I'm just going to duplicate the 2 of those to make the third and the fourth coaster. So exactly the same as what we did a moment ago. But I'm now going to select both coasters, make sure I've got all the elements selected. I'm going to do my Control-C. I'm going to do my Control-V. I'm now going to use my keyboard arrows to move that across. And there you go. And I'll now just deselect. And there we've got our 4 coasters, and we've got a couple of bits of spare wood at the end. So we're ready to move on. So we're pretty much almost ready to start adding our toolpaths. But before I do that, let's just come back up and have a look at our layers again. So I'm going to click up here. We've got our layer 1. Let's hide the bitmap layer now. And you'll see no change. And the reason for that is that we deleted off the actual bitmap. So actually, this layer here is doing nothing at all. So there'll be nothing wrong. You can leave that there if you want, or you can just leave it hidden. As it's doing nothing, I'm just going to right click and delete it. So I select delete and delete this. So that layer is now gone. And I'm left with layer 1, which I can hide and unhide. And if I hide, we'll see that everything that we have produced to date is on that layer 1. So there we go. So let's move on now at adding some tooling But before I do that, I've got one more thing I want to add, which is the way I'm going to produce these coasters is I'm not going to cut out the outline of this wood. I am going to just add a dividing line between the coasters, which is going to be a cut line that I'm going to use using an electric saw or a chop saw. So I'm not going to use the CNC router to cut these coasters. I think it'd be much quicker for me to do this with a chop saw. So what we'll do just before we do the create the toolpaths, I need to add a line along this line here for each of these coasters, but that causes a slight problem because it will be in the way of the line of the square that we've got here. So to get around that, what we're going to do, we're going to come back up to the layers, and I'm going to add a new layer. And at the moment that's called layer 2, and you see that layer 2 is now highlighted, so that is the focused layer that we're on. And now I'm just going to add a couple of lines here, which are going to be my cut lines for me to saw through. So to create a line, what I'm going to do is come up to create vectors and draw a line, select on that. I'm now going to come across to my first, where I want the first line on my coaster. I'm going to left click and I'll bring that line down to the bottom edge, and I'm going to left click again, and then I'm going to right click to close. And you'll see here I've got my line. Now all I need to do is I will copy and paste that line a number of times to divide up my coasters. So if I do Control C again and then Control V, has that worked for me, or have I just been silly there? Let's have a look. No, that's worked, that's fine. Okay, so I've got two of my lines, and if you're not sure that that's correct, I'm going to hold down Shift so I can see both my lines. And just to prove it, if I come back up to the layers, do you remember now we should be on this layer 2. If I switch off layer 1, we can see my lines are there. So that's useful to know that it's working. Okay, so I'm just going to deselect them both. I just want to select this one line again. I'm going to do Control C on there and then Control V. I'm going to use my arrow keys to move this one into position. I'm sure there are probably easier ways to do this with better shortcuts than the way I'm doing it, but I'm just doing what I know so far, which isn't too much. So Control C and Control V again. Control C one last time. And let's deselect that. Now, hopefully, what I was trying to explain earlier on makes some sense now that these lines are on top of the lines of the square and so hard to see. But again, if we go back up to our layers and switch off layer 1, we can see we've got the cut lines for our coasters. So let's put that back together. And we're now at a position where we can now start looking at some tooling. I'm just going to use one tool bit. I'm going to use a 60-degree VCarve bit on a 1/4-inch shank to carve all the bits on this, including the dividing lines. So just really to make this as simple as possible. So everything is going to be done on one tool. So let's move on now and take a look at creating our toolpaths. So to move over to our toolpaths, I'm going to come over to the right hand side top here and click on toolpaths, and then I'm going to select the little pin here just to pin the panel on the right hand side. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a toolpath for the, I'll call these the borders. So I've selected the first one. I'm now going to hold down Shift and select the remaining three. There we go. So we've now got all four borders, for want of a better word, selected. I'm going to come across to my toolpaths and I'm going to select the first one, which is the profile toolpath. Now, quite often with these, you would use an end mill. But as I said earlier, I'm just going to use the 60-degree V bit, but we'll look at that in just a second. But if we look at the cutting depths, so the start depth is 0, which is the top of our piece of wood. And for this border, I'm just going to go 1.5 millimeter. Come down to the tooling. I'm going to use the 60-degree, as I said, but if I wanted to choose something else, I'll just go to select and select the tool that I want. Just bear in mind that you must physically have these tools if you're selecting these. You can't just select these without actually having the tools. That wouldn't make any sense at all, would it? I'm just going to close this now, but just reconfirm we're on the V-bit 60-degree. Okay, coming down, next box down, and I want to cut on the line. So moving down, we're pretty much ready, and I'm ready to calculate. I'm just going to change the title of the toolpath just to make it easier for me for the future reference. So it's a profile cut and it's for my borders. So I'm just going to call this borders. And now let's calculate that toolpath. So let's just get rid of that. So now that I've done that, I'm going to change the speed on the tool here, and we can do a quick demo of that toolpath in action. So let's select, preview all toolpaths. This is the only toolpath we've got, so I could select either or, but we'll go for the top one. And there we go. So we've got our 4 borders, as I've called them. So I'm going to come back from the 3D view back to the 2D view. I'm going to just click away to deselect. And now I'm going to do similar with the smiley faces. So selected the first one, holding down Shift now, select the remaining 3. I'm going to close the current open toolpath, and this time I'm going to use the VCarve option. We'll see here that the tool already is selected. It's the V-bit 60-degree, so I don't need to change that. The start depth, as before, will be 0, but the flat depth, I'm going to go for 2.5 millimeter. And if I don't like that, I can change that later. We'll see how that goes. We'll come down here, nothing else to change really, except I'm going to change the title of this toolpath. I'm going to call this Smiley. There we go. And we can now try and calculate that. That's worked fine. We can now do a quick demo on that. So let's do a reset first of all, just to get rid of the previous attempt. I'm going to come down to here, toolpaths, and put a tick in the all toolpaths. And I'm going to preview all toolpaths again. And there we go. So let's move on to the next bit. So to finish off now, we're just left with the dividers to do. So let's close down the current open toolpath. We'll come back from the 3D view, go back to the 2D view. I'm just going to select anywhere on the page to deselect the smiley faces. And I now want to select my dividers. So I'm going to come back up to the layers, and I'm going to hide layer 1 so that I can just see my dividers. And then I'm going to left click on the first one. And then as before, hold down Shift. 3, 4, 4. Move that across there. 5. So we've got our 5 toolpaths there. That's good. Okay. And same thing. So again, on the for the dividers, I'm going to use the profile toolpath. Again, so left click on that. I'm only going to leaving it at 0 start depth. I'm only going to do 1 mil. This is just a line for me to use as a guide to saw my pieces of wood into the 4 pieces. So I don't need to go more than 1 millimeter, I think. So that will do for me. It's going to be on the line. I'm going to change the name to dividers. Hope I've spelled that correctly. And I'm going to calculate my 4 lines. Come back up to reset preview just to get rid of the previous attempts. There we go. And I'm going to tick the box for all toolpaths. And if all goes well, this will be our final run through. So we'll select preview all toolpaths. And then hopefully we have our coasters. Let's give it a go. So there you go. So we have our 4 coasters. As I mentioned earlier, all I would do is cut the wood on a chop saw, give it a light sanding around the edges, and apply a couple of layers of Danish oil, and we are ready to go. I hope you found this useful. I'm sorry, I do apologize that where I was trying to demonstrate the removing the JPEG image and separating that from the vector file, that didn't go too smoothly for me, but hopefully you got the idea. And you can use layers to help you if you're getting a bit stuck yourself to see that. The way I just moved the vector file out the way, it's just a very clumsy way of doing it, but it worked for me. But anyway, I think that's about as much as I can say on this one. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry this is taking a bit longer than I'd hoped. Thanks again, and goodbye.